and welcome to another episode of Throttle Stop Garage. In this episode, we're going to take the tooling that we made last time and a fresh blank, and we're going to make the final part for the car. Stay tuned. Okay, so in the last episode, and thanks for all the views on that, by the way. I have no idea why these things get popular, but the algorithm, it's all the algorithm. I did spend the time and the money to make some metal hammer forms, and these hammer forms, again, can be used multiple times. So in this case, I'm going to go one more time. We've got some blanks. Now, the last blank, so for the part that was our test part, we took it easy on ourselves and we made those parts out of 22 gauge stainless. Now we're going to up our game. We're going to go all the way to 20. So with 20 gauge stainless, it's going to get a little bit more difficult. You can just tell, right? Just when you look at the thing. This is just A2 stainless for those that are interested. It is annealed. So these are ready to go, ready to form. We're going to plunk them back in to the hammer forms, and we're going to crank out another set of halves, and I'm not going to show you almost any of that. We're just going to go to a quick montage of how it happened. If you want to know how all the details, you go back and watch the other video. But in today's video, we're going to cover the stuff I didn't touch on in the last video. All right, so I'm just going to put this down because it's starting to get a little heavy. Okay, that's better. In the last video, the things that I didn't show you in the last video, how we planish those parts. So those parts need to be planished before they get polished. And it's sort of a long process. I videoed it, but I didn't show it last time. The last video was really long. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to planish those parts. We also have to put the mount tabs on it. We also have to do a little bit of passivation. So we've taken some stainless steel, we've welded it. We're just in my garage. We have no fancy tools around here. Well, we have fancy tools around here, but they're not that fancy. This is stuff that you can do. So we're going to passivate the part to make sure that we don't have any free iron on it that could rust potentially. And we're going to finish it all the way to the bitter end. This is one of the big hang-ups for people working on cars in their garage, at least in my experience anyways. Any old fool can get a part to 90%, but it's getting it to 100%. So I'm going to cover every single detail until this particular job is completely finished. There isn't going to be a single thing left on it. That part's going to get bagged, and it's going to get put away, and it's going to be ready to install. First, a recap.
So if you didn't tune in last time, go back and watch the second video where I go over all of the hammer forming and how many times I broke the tools. So this is a flow forming tool that I made in my garage all by myself, and just some plastic tooling. It's ultra high molecular weight plastic that I've just carved into various shapes. And I'm just dinging away here with an air riveter, and it moves pretty easily. No real huge problems with getting this to go. Then you cut the shapes out, you spend hours fiddling around fitting them, and then you tack them up and weld them. Now, this time I was paying a lot more attention to the heat and trying very carefully. I did take some viewers' advice. I tacked it at about twice the frequency I was tacking it before, just to make sure it was nice as possible. Everything's back purged. And here's the finished weld. So it was really very tiny. It was great. That's the tacks. So tons of tacks. And you can see the difference between the two parts. So as we're planishing the part, I first marked it up with some Sharpie so that I could see what I was doing. And then I've got a little piece of plastic, the ultra high molecular weight plastic again, on the end of my rail dolly. And as I'm just tinking away on it, you're just basically hammering it out until you flatten it. Now you're not trying to dent it, right? So we're not going after it on the bag there, the sandbag, or on the wood. I'm really just trying to sort of regionally bend it back to get it into shape. And once I'm happy enough that it's reasonably straight, I start in with a sanding. Again, long strokes here, folks. Try to make sure that you're not gouging or creating extra waviness to the part. And then anytime I find other little bits and pieces that I've not picked up, then the rail comes back over and I'm going to continue dinging away on it. Now this took about a day worth of work. I didn't care. Okay, so after we've used the marker and a file just to sort of pick the surface to make it as clean and as gorgeous as I can, we then went ahead and sanded it down. 80 grit sandpaper is all we used here. And learning from last time, again, what we're going to do is now we're going to fit it to the hood. Before I do the other final sanding part, we're just going to carefully scribe where we have to make our final cuts to finish the part off. So that's a little bit more work again, but now I've got the shape that I want. It's not really hugely different from the other one. It's just subtly different, but I like this one a whole lot more. Okay, so let's do the final steps and away we go. So with the original hood part back on the hood there, I'm just verifying that everything is going to fit in nice. I use the original templates to just scribe a line and then over to the belt sander and very carefully creep up on that line. There's no going back if you make a mistake at this point. So I'm carefully sanding it away. I do have enough gauge. I guess I left myself probably about 2 millimeters to clean out. Being really careful at the end. In fact, the end I'm going to need to hand file to get it right. But once I've got the sort of gross level in there, then I found the best way was to grab a file, and then I can make sure that both halves are in essence the same height. I know that kind of sounds crazy, but you'll get sanding away on one side and end up making a mess of things. Deburring as I go, I just do that sort of incessantly, and there I am. That's hand filing the end part because the end of that trim part kind of hooks around the corner, and I don't want any gaps or unsightly areas in there. So I wanted that all to be as nice as I could. And once we got it filed, and honestly, I left this footage in. Why fake it? It takes the time it takes, folks. I don't want to tell you it took me 15 minutes to make this part. It took 3 days. So you're going to get in there and do it. And there, that's the important part. You see what I'm doing with the end of the hammer? So the sides, while they're sort of regionally fine, as you're working on these parts, sometimes they stretch. You got to get the hammer in, stretch them back out. Okay, now make yourself real nervous. Yep, I just took a drill to my carbon fiber hood. All right, so it's a 3mm drill, so it's sort of tight for the M3 fastener that we're going to put in there. Sweep away all that carbon dust, for heaven's sake. You don't want to breathe that stuff in. And then it's on to making the mount tabs. I made these mount tabs twice. Yeah, you try welding an M3 nut onto a little hole. It was horrific. I'd weld it in there and I would just get a little bit too much heat, which is hard to do. I'm learning how to do the TIG on the small stuff. It's a lot trickier than it looks. Anyways, third time was a charm. I got them all in. They were all fine, and we're ready to start fitting up the hood to this piece, right? So we're now ready to get it all mounted. Okay, so here are the mount brackets now mounted to the hood, and what I've done is just scribed on each side of them where the trim goes, and we'll cut back to those lines, and then these brackets will fit up inside the trim. That's the idea behind them, and I'll carefully just tack them in. No real need to weld these solid. Yeah, I better get the funk out for this one. This was not easy, folks. Yeah. So by the time I fit it in there, now I've got the first mark on. Now, on the original hood, that first spot that I'm working on there, that was a slot. The second position was a slot, and the final position is just a hole. And now I know why. So as I'm doing this, just for anybody who's interested in doing this, I'm actually lighting up on the tab and then just sort of wicking the weld over to the edge, because if you burn through the edge, you don't have any edge to burn through, and that material's like 40 thou, 50 thou thick, so really easy to burn through an edge there, which is horrific. So you don't want to do that. So then I fit up the first one, and it goes in where it goes in, right? That's why you need a little bit of a slot. Now, as you put that together, that's going to push the position back for the next tab, and then you're going to push it back again, because you're losing the thickness of the material as you get the hood down and mounted to it. So I'm remarking where the center is. So I've got the center of the hole marked, and I remark where the center is, and then I'm moving that mount position back each time so they come in perfectly. So another couple of little tacks, and then they're mount, and then I'm going to remark where the center line has now moved for each one of those, and then go. So at that point, I just needed a little bit more slot, so I added some more slot to that hole. The last one went in absolutely perfectly. Carefully file the point. You've got the slot. You can even see on the trim part right there that I've got a little black line marked where the center is going to be, the center line of the hole. And then I was getting good at it by the end, and it's tricky to do, just super tricky to weld that up. But yeah, again, you do it enough times, you're going to get good at it. I never did burn through the edge, and I can say that now because the welding gods have already shined on me, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay, so now we're just going to take it off, do the final sanding, get it polished up,
And then we got a few other tricks that we got to play on this part before I'm going to call it done. And when it's done, it's actually going to be completely finished. And that's the way it's going to bolt onto the car when we're done with it. Again, really happy at this point with how it's all turning out. It's lovely. And it's exactly what I was looking for. Okay, so there's the part finished and in place. You can see that side. Now you got to be happy with the fit there. This is awfully good. So that's with the fasteners in, everything buttoned down and solid. Again, this part's going nowhere.
Okay, so with that done, the last round of picking and filing and just getting everything as perfect as I can commences now. It's a ton of work, just a ton of work. I guess it doesn't have to be as much work if you don't want it to be quite as perfect, but you know, you got to deburr it all and then sand it and sand it and sand it. And every scratch has got to come out, every single scratch.
Once again, it's going to be hard to pick up the detail on this, but that's the 80 grit. So what I'm checking for, and I do have some natural light overhead in the garage, is I'm just checking for any scratches that are still left on the surface from the filing, and they have to be removed at this stage. Like you'll just be polishing scratches unless you can get all the scratches out. All right, so now that surface is pretty much perfect. There's still a few spots here that I can see. And then I'm going to switch up, again, go to 120, 220, 320, and then I'll do some wet sanding first. And then the buffing stage just takes a moment. Anyway, we're happily moving along here. It's pretty good. There's still a few areas that need some touch up. So we'll get that finished with the 80. But in the meantime, a lot of guys would even quit here, and there's still like any little blemish you notice is just going to keep getting worse and worse as you go along. So we'll get it all fixed up and then go from here.
I think you can hear it in my voice. I'm starting to get a little bit tired of this job anyway. Put a little bit of a rag down there just to catch the abrasive particles coming off because they were leaving scratches. So you have to be really careful. But as you go down in grit, it actually gets faster to do, and away we go. So with the sanding done, we're now going to turn to our polisher and we're going to get things buffed up. Now, I don't have a fancy polisher. You probably don't have a fancy polisher either. The one I have is just an 8-inch grinder that I found at the Princess Auto. It was lonely, so I brought it home. The bearings were shot right out of the box. This thing could no more turn an 8-inch grinding wheel at a speed that would remove metal than anything, but it can polish, just barely. I've got a treated cotton buff on the one side. The treated cotton is for faster stock removal, and then I have also, it's a sewn cotton on the other side, and this is what I use to put the final finish on. So polishing's not super exciting, but I'll just give you a quick look in, and we'll polish this thing up. Yeah, there's no way I'm going to be talking while trying to do this in real time, but yeah, you're just going to load it up. I'm using a green abrasive, which is for stainless steel. As nice as the treated cotton makes it, the real cotton is a little bit different when it's the untreated stuff. I usually go at it pretty aggressively initially to get some heat into the part, and then you back off. You have to just give it the lightest touch to get the best polish. And you can spend any amount of time you like on this. Like, you could be there for 5 minutes or 5 hours and it all comes out looking about the same. But with stainless steel, it's easy enough to do. It's easy enough to polish. Just be careful that it doesn't rip or grab the part.
Okay, so a little bit of time later and we're done. So it's all polished up. Once you've got it sanded nicely, if you've wet sanded it to say 600, which I think I did with this one, then it's no big deal to put the polish on it. You're just looking again to remove the fine scratches and any other imperfections along the way. There's nothing really, I mean, that's the finished part. So it's all turned out beautiful. So now that all the polishing is done, we're going to passivate the part. I have no idea how this is going to work. I've never done this before, but a viewer did suggest that I should passivate or electro-polish the parts when they're done. And all the passivation is going to do is it's going to take any of the free iron and strip it off the part, right? So if a part's been welded, especially, then on the inside where the weld is, or on the outside where the weld is, you've changed the chemistry subtly of the material, and these parts may rust. So what we're going to do is just simply immerse them in a bath of citric acid. I've just gone down to the local store that sells canning stuff. Citric acid is used for tomatoes, apparently. I know nothing of this. And from what I read on the internet, a 4% solution is what's needed. I'm not a chemist, but I've put 2.5 liters of water into this wallpapering tray, which came with a effective stick so I can float the part. Right, so if I've got 2.5 liters of water in the tray, all I need to do is mix in 40 grams of the citric acid for every liter of water, because a liter of water is a kilogram. I've got 141 grams to work with. So in this case, we're going to throw in 100 grams of citric acid into 2.5 liters of water. We're going to mix it up. The water's warm. It's room temperature. It's been sitting out while I've been monkeying around getting the part hung. And then we're going to immerse it in this bath for about half an hour, rinse it clean. And as soon as we rinse it, then the chromium oxide that forms on the part naturally makes the part impervious to rust. So I'm hoping that this doesn't impact the finish, which is very nice. All right, so that's the finish for the real part. All right, so it's gorgeous. So we're trying it on the test part first. If something bad happens, there's always another way to do this. So anyway, I don't have any other methods. I'm not hooking up battery chargers and other acids and stuff. That sounds like a lot of work to me, so I'm not doing it because I'm doing this once, not a lot. And for a car part that's outside, this makes sense. And for a header and other things, this is stupid. So I'm not going to do it ever again. So I don't want to waste a bunch of money on this. This was 5 Canadian dollars, so virtually free for the rest of the world. Okay, so we need 100 grams in the old mystical scale. I'm trying not to breathe in the fumes. I'll just carefully throw that into the bath. We'll then stir it around a little bit, make sure it's well mixed, and then submerge the part. Okay, so it's been half an hour now, so we'll take the part out. Carefully drain off the acid solution. Doesn't look like it's affected the finish at all. And we'll just give it a quick rinse with water and away we go. Okay, for the real part, I'd like to get the insides as clean as possible before I start with the citric acid bath. So again, I've already scrubbed it a little bit. I don't know how visible that's going to be, but it's got a little bit of discoloration, not much. I mean, it was purged when it was welded, so it's pretty good. We're just going to use a little barkeeper's friend. Now, it's not going to passivate anything. It's just a cleaner, right? But it's oxalic acid, so it's a little acid cleaner for things that are stainless. So we can put a little bit of that. It's super cheap, too. In the bin, my little container that I use for everything out here. Add a little water and make a paste. And
so with that paste made, I've just sluiking it on and I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to sluice it on in there. I think I left it for about a half an hour or so. Came back in, brushed it off. I did both insides and outsides of the part. I wanted to make sure it was completely clean before I put it into the acid bath. Again, you'll read all kinds of stuff online about this, but this makes sense to me.
All right, so after we've drilled the holes in the carbon fiber hood, we're going to have to seal the hood. So remember that I've got a foam core in the upper part of the hood to provide sort of extra strength. Again, my carbon fiber hood you can stand on, no problem. And once you've drilled through, again, it's just good practice to go in with a little bit of epoxy and seal the inside of that hood. Now, I'm not using anything fancy here. Again, just a little bit of everyone knows what this is, right? A little bit of JB Weld. Okay, everybody's garage favorite friend. So a little bit of JB Weld, piece of welding rod. All right, we're just gonna go in, sluice it around in the holes, and then they're sealed, and I don't have to worry about them. Again, I'm not doing anything here. I just don't want to have to get to body work and then think, oh, I've got to seal the holes that I drilled for the hood in the car. That's, you know, waste time some other time. Don't waste time now. So just, I don't need much JB Weld, just a little bit. So I have drilled these out. They were 3 mil hole, so I've taken them out an extra little bit. Not much though. And too much here is just extra work, so you want to get enough in there to thoroughly coat it. And there's enough solids in the JB Weld, just like a lot of other epoxies, to do. It'll take up a bit of the slack. Again, not that there's much here, but a little bit. Okay, so as promised, here's the two different parts. This is the one that we made as the test part. It is hard to tell the difference between the two, but not impossible. So again, it's a little wider here. The peak is a little flatter, right? And then the end shape is different. And the end is sort of simply rounded off. Again, the front end a little broader towards the front edge. So while it's a pretty close reproduction to what the original was, it's not exactly what I wanted. But I was happy I was able to make it. So that was the learning part. The part that we've just made is, in my view, it's just a little bit more elegant, if anything. Okay, so when we fit it on, we can see that, again, it's slimmer in profile this way. It's a little slimmer. The far end mimics the front end a little better, so it's a nicer rounded shape. Right? We've got a nice peak all the way down, so it's not flat. And then that front edge is a lot slimmer. Okay, a lot slimmer, a little taller. And I think that is a lot nicer. Right? It comes to a really nicely defined point. Everything here is looking really great. The end result of all the cleaning and all the everything else on the inside is we've got a nice looking part on the inside. Again, these welds were really tricky to do. This video is going to be long. I don't care if you're still here. Thanks for sticking it out. And then we've gone in and again, we've passivated the part. I'm not expecting this to rust. I think it's going to be just fine in the long haul. Okay, and now there are two. All right, that's it. That's a wrap. You can see they both turned out great. That's the one that's going on the car. So we're now at the point where we can bag it up and put it away. The hood's been sealed. Everything's been done. Part's been passivated. Citric acid, good for tomatoes, good for stainless steel passivation. Get it up to 4% or a little bit more. Apparently we're going to be just fine. I don't know, we could salt test it or something, who cares. This one's all straightened out, it's ready to go, it's a finished part. I love that when you're getting it, when you get to that point. The problem now is going to be that I'm going to bag this with the screws, with everything ready to go, and I'm probably going to lose it. You all know that's going to happen. Anyway, thanks again for coming along for the ride. I do appreciate the views. Like, subscribe, make the algorithm happy. And with that, we'll catch you on the next episode. Keep your stick on the ice.